We've collected a lot of data over time about Israel, the relationship between Israel and the United States, the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, and of course, most recently, the war with the U.S. and Israel jointly attacking Iran. We're going to be issuing a report summarizing a lot of that data, but it's going to focus on uh, a really interesting point, at least interesting to me, perspective. The Trump base has decidedly different views towards Israel than more traditional Republicans, and certainly different from Democrats. And the gap between them is growing wider. So the Trump base has a more favorable view towards Israel, and that view is becoming more favorable. And among traditional Republicans, it's not as enthusiastic in moving in the other direction. Start with a real simple perspective. We asked just last week if people had favorable or unfavorable opinions of a variety of countries around the world. When it comes to Israel, 49% of voters had a favorable opinion, 37% unfavorable, not nearly the numbers we would have seen many years ago. But when you break that down among the Trump base, 73% of that base has a favorable opinion of Israel. Only a small segment has an unfavorable view. When you go to more traditional Republicans, it's a much more even split, 50% favorable, 39% favorable. Obviously, most Democrats say unfavorable at this point in time. I want to put the number in perspective, though, about the Trump base. They have a more favorable view of Israel today than they do of the UK, France, and Germany. So significant difference. They also have a different awareness of what's going on in the conflict. A majority of the Trump base knows that Saudi Arabia and other Gulf nations have been involved helping the U.S. And Israel in these attacks. So a majority of the Trump base believes that. A plurality of everybody else, including traditional Republicans, says that's not true. So you've got an information gap that is significant and perhaps fueling some of the other issues. We also, by the way, solid majority of the Trump base believes that the Palestinians are trying to destroy Israel. Traditional Republicans not quite as sure on that, and most Democrats say that's just not true. That the Palestinians simply want more equal rights. But here's the part that kind of caught me off guard. When the war began, we did our very first survey on that very first Saturday, and we found about 40% supported the attacks at that time. That number has been very steady. It's slipped perhaps a point or two more recently as people have gotten tired of it. But among the Trump base, the number who support these attacks by the U.S. and Israel has gone up 6 points from 78% to 84%. Among more traditional Republicans, support for the attacks has gone down by 8 points, and it's been very steady over the last few months. This also ties into a larger trend that we've seen. We did a survey shortly after the horrific October 7th terrorist attack back in 2023. At that point, most Americans said we should side with Israel in the fight against the Palestinians. But at the same time, hardly anybody supported the Palestinians, and a lot of people were just saying we should stay out of it or not get involved. Well, over a couple of years, support for Israel fell. By October of last year, 2 years after the attacks, just 37% of Americans thought we should be supporting Israel in the conflict, the larger conflict, and a plurality said we should not get involved. Since the fighting began in Iran, something interesting has happened. Support for Israel among the Trump base has gone up 7 points, reversing that longer trend. support among more traditional Republicans has gone down. Look, I can go into lots of numbers, and there's lots of things that we can talk about to document this or support this. But the core thing is the Trump base, very supportive of Israel, getting more supportive. Traditional Republicans, less supportive, and heading in the opposite direction. Okay, immigration. Number here that caught my eye. 40% of voters now tell us that the Trump administration deportation policies have gone too far. 51% disagree. What's significant about that is those numbers are identical to what we measured at the beginning of the year before all the furor began in Minneapolis. And as that battle went on, the opposition to the president's deportation policy went up significantly. We saw a situation where there was a tremendous amount of interest in the story, and people were speculating about what impact will this have in the midterms. And it turns out, like most of these stories, they're big for a moment, but stories in January rarely have an impact in November. Whatever effect there was on perceptions of President Trump's deportation policy from that event has now dissipated. Finally, and this is just a quick note, as I mentioned earlier, we've asked favorable, unfavorable opinions on a variety of countries. The Trump base thinks more highly of Israel than it does Germany, France, or the UK. Well, there's another segment of the population we don't talk about as much, but it's the progressive base on the Democratic side of the aisle, the people who support policies like those of AOC. When we asked if they had a favorable or an unfavorable opinion of the United States, just 57% of the progressive base had a favorable opinion of our country, 39% unfavorable. What makes that perhaps even more startling is that the progressive base has a significantly higher opinion of France, the UK, and Germany than they do of the United States. You can do with that as you please, but I thought it was worth bringing to everybody's attention on this